Hello and welcome back, and that is right, today I want to talk about Aoostar or AOOSTAR, Aoostar, AOOSTAR? However one pronounces it, it has to be said that these guys have been rocking out some great NAS solutions in the last 12 to 18 months. And although a lot of DIY NAS solutions have tended to be little nook or kind of mini PC manufacturers that have tried to stretch their wings into the NAS market, very few brands have actually brought out unique, tailor-made solutions like these. You know, when you see mini PCs knocking around on AliExpress, eBay, whatever, you tend to find that the same PC is getting knocked around with a different label. These are one of the brands at the back who are actually doing the building of the things. Now, all that notwithstanding, I'm going to say straight out the gate, the WTR Pro is a fairly middle ground NAS. It's not the most exciting NAS in the field. It just simply isn't. There's a lot going for it, and it's available in two versions. There's an N100 version, a quad-core 4th thread using the N100 CPU with 16 gig of memory, but this is not it. This is the beefier, chunkier model. This 4-bay here, rocking out with a Ryzen 7 processor, that is the 5825U. It's an 8-core, 16-thread processor, rocking out with 32 gig of memory. So the base level hardware is pretty damn good with a 2 gigahertz AMD Radeon graphics integrated into that processor as well. So a decent level of kit underneath the bonnet. So why am I being so middle of the road about this one when I'm saying such nice things about the brand? Well, we're going to have to get onto that later on. But did you notice something when I was waving this around the camera? Right? I like the design of this. I really do. The front there, it's got that removable front panel. Let's get that off of there. It's got our 4 bays inside. We've got a weirdly, I've not seen this before, but it should exist, cover for our power button. On the back, we have a rear mounted fan, huge rear mounted fan there. And again, the noise level, we'll talk about that later on. We've got ventilation there. We've also got ventilation at the base level there. And that's because the motherboard is underneath there, the main PCB. But have you noticed something I've not highlighted yet? That's right. The ports. What? That's right. They have gone with the WTR Pro having ports on the side of the system. And at first, I did not like this. I am someone that when I deploy NASs, I deploy quite a lot of them, not just this nightmare chaos tower of destruction that sits next to me, but when I deploy them, I put them on my desk, I connect them via the rear to my test machines, and I run my tests. So when I saw these ports on the side, I was all ready to get on my high horse and properly slate this. The problem is, I actually grew to love having the ports on the side, and now I kind of want all NASs to have the ports on the side. Now, why is that? One, accessibility. They are so much easier to access when they are on the side. Many NAS users quite like having ports on the front, and maybe in a perfect world, all of our ports would be on the front. Sure, network ports that are running into the wall, going into our switches, routers, whatever. But what I really liked about these is when I was deploying this on my desk for testing, although it's the same volumetric space as the majority of other NAS solutions I've talked about here on the channel, you probably could boil these down and they'd probably be exactly the same volumetric space on the desk. The fact still remains that because it was facing this way, it was taking up less space on my horizontal radius. On top of that, because I didn't have to worry about the back, yes, I needed to think about ventilation, but it meant I could get it much closer to the wall without worrying about the bending of the cables. And with cables coming out sideways, I can actually tailor a lot of it. So as much as I wanted to slag this system off and its weird side profile ports, I grew to love them. Now, the external chassis is metal all the way around. The base of it has got a ventilation panel here that we can remove, and we'll get onto that later on. And again, everything is removable front and back. Now, the trays are click and load trays, but I'm going to tell you right now, I grew to despise these trays. I did not like these. These are not traditional click and load trays. Now, what do I mean by click and load trays? Normally, when I talk about click and load trays, these are trays that have little removable clips on the side. You put the drive inside, and then you replace the clips on the side, and then the drive doesn't come out. And then if you want, remove the clips, remove the drive during hot swapping. It's that straightforward. These trays also, as you can see there, got 2.5-inch drive inside. So what's my beef with these? Well, as good as they are, because I do think they are good trays. They've even gone ahead and applied a MUX adapter here for if you're going to use an extendable sized drive. What I didn't like was I would take a drive, put them inside like so, and you'd have to kind of ease out the side of the drive. There's no removable side clips, and then the drive is inside. But removing the drive out of this was absolutely nightmarish. Pulling the drive out because the clips aren't removable. You have to leverage the drive against the inside of the tray. Why is that bad? Well, because in the event of a drive failing and you're going to introduce and hot swap drives in a system that's live, you want to be really delicate with drives. Sometimes, although this drive might be dead when you're removing it, so you're like, yeah, just be as rough as you want, there's still no avoiding that you don't really want to manhandle drives too aggressively. And not having simple removable clips or screws just undermines that. Now, in their defense, there is screws. There's screws on the side. You can go ahead and not use the clips to hold the drives in place. As you can see there are clips on each area there, with no means to unpop them this side. But having click and load trays are going to make people use that facility. And later on, in a pinch when they're removing them, it's going to be problematic. Inside each of those, we have got a combined SATA and data connector there on the rear, and that's directly backed onto that fan. So overall, I quite like that there. If we go to the ports and connections, let's slide that in properly. We're going to see something I love and something I don't. We've got a whole amount of USB ports here. Not only have we got 4 USB Type A's, 2 of them 5 gig USB, 2 of them standard USB 2. We've also got a high performance USB-C port there that can also do a visual output. There's even an SD card there at the base, a micro SD card, and we've also got visual outputs as well. Now, that's mostly good. I will say I'm disappointed at only having 5 gig USB, but that is of course CPU related. And I will say there, that TF card there, that micro SD, just give me full-size SD. I think there's a lot of users using quite high, big cameras out there that would prefer to have a chunkier SD card slot. And micro SD card slots, apart from maybe a low-level OS drive, and remember, you're only looking at about 30-50 megs on a card like that in terms of performance. It's kind of limiting. I'd rather have had a full-size SD card there. But what I really want to talk about are these two. These are 2.5 GBE. And that, my friends, annoys me. This is a decent little system. It's got Gen 3 ×4 slots inside. We'll talk about those more later on. But this, I hate seagulls, this system having 2.5 GBE when you've got a 16 thread, 8 core CPU with 16 lanes to play with of internal architecture and 32 gig of DDR5 memory, this is ready for 10G and it doesn't have it. Now, yes, you can use USB adapters to add 2.5 and 5 gig if you need to, but that doesn't arrive at it out the box. Also, did you see a PCIe upgrade slot there? That's right, there isn't one. There are M2 adapters in the wild that work with TrueNAS, Unraid, etc. that allow you to add 10 GBE. We've talked about them on the channel already. But this is not a great spot to start applying adapters with no PCIe cavity to slot it into. You can take advantage of M2 adapters and have it lying on the desk, but that's hideous. What I'm saying is, this not having 10 GBE annoyed the hell out of me, and it also meant that my performance testing on the system was difficult, because frankly, when you've got 4 hard drives inside here, even the most bog standard SATA hard drives, they were going to saturate that. You put 4, 12 TB hard drives in a RAID 5 environment, that's going to mostly saturate this. This will give you about 500 to 600 megs if you lag them together, SMB multi-channel, etc. So that doesn't even talk about the SSDs on the base, and we'll get to that in a moment. But the fact this arrives out with just 2.5 GBE really bummed me out. Now, when it came to the base level panel, we'll open this up now. I will say, for the most part, I do like the arrangement here inside. The M.2s is inside. We went into Unraid, and then via Unraid went into Terminal. And from Terminal, we were able to navigate our way in and check out the PCI lane allocation, and found that each of the M.2 NVMe slots inside are Gen 3 ×4. I used Gen 4 drives inside, just to be on the safe side and know. But, yep, downgraded down. But 3 ×4 as a downgrade on a Gen 3 system is not a downgrade. That is full speed potential. It's just downgraded because I was using larger drives. There on the base, we have got a T formation there. What's really interesting, as you may see, is an additional M.2 there. there is a slot there for a Wi-Fi adapter inside there. Again, kind of surprised there's not one inside. I kind of thought there would be, but okay. But on either side here, on these M.2 NVMe slots here, both of them are 2280. But you may have noticed there's no means to add a smaller SSD inside there. Now, frankly, that's not a problem. Most people looking at buying an SSD off the shelf now, you're not going to go for 2230, 224's length SSDs because they cost more because they're unique build, and also you get lower capacity there, and some of them use lower quality NAND going down to QLC. So the fact that you can't use shorter length M.2 NVMe's is not the end of the world, but still kind of surprised they're absent there. Again, we did performance numbers in Unraid via terminal, and individual SSDs gave the following numbers. In terms of read performance, both slots gave me 3 gigabytes per second. Again, it dipped down to 2.9, 3.1, so we averaged it at 3 gigabytes per second read. And in write performance, we got it down at 2.5 to 2.6 gigabytes per second. Again, given the SSDs we were using in there were Gen 4x4, there was no limitations there. But overall, within Unraid via terminal on the command line, those are good, consistent 1 gig write numbers there. Now, it's when we transfer data from one SSD to the other that I was kind of surprised, because when we did that, the performance numbers absolutely gutterball, down to 490 to 500 megabytes per second, transferring data between them. So there's clearly some kind of lane limitation there inside for handling that data. Now, most users are never going to be doing that. You're not going to be transferring data one to the other, and if you had them, for example, in a RAID 1 environment, you don't transfer data between them. RAID 1, the data is being read and written simultaneously to 2 disks parallel. Still, that did present something of a small bottleneck there. Now, when we did external performance, you'll be unsurprised to hear that we fully saturated the 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports on both of those. There was just no point. We started the AGA testing and we were just like, we're wasting our time here, me and Ed, because 2 times 2.5 GBE, massive saturation with those drives. Overall, really happy with them being 3x4. It's weirdly rare, I would say, and there's definitely the lane allocation availability on a CPU like that. Memory inside, this one arrived with 32 gig of DDR5 memory, so you got on-die ECC, but not traditional ECC, and there is a difference. We've done a whole video about it. It's about checks happening throughout the SSD and on the SSD. Again, do watch that video to find out. 32 gigs good, and that is the maximum supported by that CPU. If you go for the M100 version, by the way, you're going to get the one M.2 NVMe slot there, which is a little bit annoying, and obviously it lowers the maximum memory down just a wee bit there. Now, we're not going to put the base back on. We talk about power consumption and noise. When it came to power consumption on this device, it was actually pretty impressive. Remember, we had 4 hard drives inside there. They were 4 TB Seagate Iron Wolf standard class drives and 2 Gen 4x4 SSDs inside. And power consumption, if you look at the numbers here, was peak use, with all drives having self-testing taking place on them one by one, and the SSDs being benchmarked on SSH via terminal. We saw perform power consumption of 65 watts. It kind of dipped 63 to 66. But when it came to idle, when the system was not being accessed with that CPU, because that CPU, which by the way goes all the way up to 4.5 gigahertz, but actually starts at around 1.8, 2.0, the power consumption in idle was a nice, easy-going 23 to 24 watts. Really, really happy with that in terms of power consumption on a 4-bay hybrid storage NAS system. Now, in terms of noise, noise is another one, right? This is a metal chassis NAS system, so I get it, it's going to make a bit of noise. But I would say straight away, it wasn't that bad, and the idle noise and the active noise was incredibly similar. When we had the system idle, so it was with all four hard drives and the 2 SSDs just sitting there waiting, we'd left it idle for 15 minutes, it went to 33 to 35 dBA, which is pretty good for a 4-bay hard drive system. Had I used my enterprise drives, bigger drives, high capacity drives around or higher than 8 TB, there would have been a bit more ambient noise from the drives, but the internal fan that's on top of the CPU and the rear cooling system is clearly a very low noise fan, did a really great job. Now, high access with all the drives gunning, it was when we're doing our power testing, it went up to, in terms of noise, just 35 to 38 dBA. That's not that bad. I've seen systems like this easy crank into the 40s and early 50s of dBA noise recognition testing a system like this. This managed to really keep the noise down low, and that really surprised me. And when you do go to their official pages, by the way, you see a lot of information on that. Clearly that has been designed in mind all the way from the ground up on this system. Bottom line, what do I think? I'll say right now, I do like it as a 4-bay. One of the biggest problems I've had is obviously I've seen a lot of NAS systems in the last 6 to 12 months that just start rocking out the gate with some insane hardware. This system is aiming for a much different market than those, and unfortunately it took me a while to bring my scope kind of into what this is trying to target as a solution. It's a 4 hard drive RAID 5 enabled solution. It's arriving at a price point of around, if you go for the M100 version, about $399. If you go for this Ryzen 8 core version, it's around $459, and that's with the SSD and the memory included. The point I'm making is, as long as you understand that you are getting a system at sub £500 with an 8-core 16-thread CPU, 32 gig of memory, and a 512 gigabyte SSD inside for under 500 quid, this is banging. But just keep in mind that as good as that price point is, when you compare it to everything else in the market, you are going to have to put your own OS on board. It will arrive with a Windows SSD inside, obviously, they always do. But the lack of scalability towards 10 GBE does irk me. I'm not going to harass this over its lack of ECC memory. I don't think that is as big a deal in a system of this scale and its price point. I know there are going to be users that disagree with me, but its unique design, its definite low power consumption and low noise comparative to what it's actually putting on the table is very, very good. But the lack of scalability towards 10 GBE is going to annoy some of you. And those M.2 NVMe's there on the base, as great as they are, you can't really use those towards 10 GBE via those adapters comfortably without making things messy. I love the new design choices. I love this chassis. And again, I think the brand is doing a banging job of pushing the envelope of what OS-free ready-to-go NAS solutions out the gate are doing. I still think they're one of the best names in the industry, even if I can barely pronounce it. But this as a solution is definitely aiming for the middle. And if that is you, you're going to love it. But if it's not, maybe go for something a bit beefier. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this. Link below is the full written review of this device with further testing, some of the tests we didn't really talk about. And we also go into the BIOS a little bit more as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.